Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm running down my top 50 solo board games of all time. I've done full playthroughs of most of these games, so please check the links in the description below if you want more information. Ghost Stories is a notoriously punishing cooperative tower defense game where you take the role of warrior monks protecting a village from nightmarish spirits. You move around a 3x3 grid, either taking the special action of the tile you're on, or fighting off ghosts by spending resources and rolling dice. The theme really comes to life with some of the most stunning art in all of board gaming. For Northwood is a quick, solo-only trick-taking card game. Now that might sound like it couldn't possibly work, but it actually creates a wonderfully puzzly game where you attempt to win an exact number of tricks by strategically using a growing pool of special abilities. This is the perfect travel game, and really just couldn't be any cuter. It sounds scary, but Horrified is actually a family-friendly cooperative game that also plays great solo. You battle against a pantheon of classic universal monsters like Dracula and the Mummy and the Invisible Man. You use pick up and deliver to protect villagers and collect items that you use to defeat the monsters. Hitsy Road is a zombie survival game with a bunch of dice rolling. As a multiplayer game, it uses a brutal auction system, but in the solo game, you're instead drafting cards in a very clever way that involves a bit of push your luck and a lot of managing your scarce resources. Resist is a solitaire card game with amazing art, where you take the role of the Spanish Maquis after the Spanish Civil War. You'll be using your small resistance group to try to complete missions. While they stay hidden, they're weaker, but you can reveal them to use their full power, but they're lost for the rest of the game. This makes for brutally difficult decisions, especially late in the game as your forces are slowly dwindling. Bullet Heart transforms from a kinetic real-time multiplayer romp into a turn-based thinky spatial puzzle when you're playing solo. And it's a ton of fun either way. You'll be pulling tokens from a bag and placing them in the corresponding column, trying to place all the tokens on your board before they reach the bottom. The bullet hell theme starts to make more sense as your board fills up with tokens and your palms begin to sweat. Block by Block's intriguing theme of taking back the streets from an oppressive regime really comes to life on the table, with gameplay that feels refreshing and original. The way the cops move and spread around the city feels organic, and the semi-randomized map creates new checkpoints and critical intersections, forcing you to carefully plan which roads to barricade and which buildings to burn and which neighborhoods to ultimately liberate. Nautilion is my favorite game in the ONIVERSE series, but they are all great solo games. Nautilion stands out for me because it takes a dice-driven roll and move mechanism and makes it both compelling and approachable. You roll multiple dice and choose one to assign to your ship, one to assign to the enemy, and one to assign to an event. So deciding exactly how to assign the dice is often tricky and always fun. I'm enamored with how DUNE IMPERIUM combines worker placement and deck building, where the card you play determines where your worker can go on the board. So as you draft new cards into your deck, you have to pay attention both to its ability and where it lets you place workers. That synergy is flawless. Kanban EV is one of my favorite heavy Euro games, and when you play it solo, it becomes twice as complex. Still, when I'm in the mood for something super crunchy that will break my brain, this is one of the best. The worker placement system is tight and confrontational. Timing is everything as you jockey for position in the different departments. Please your demanding boss, brag about your accomplishments during meetings, and outmaneuver annoying coworkers trying to sabotage your career. I love Great Western Trail with 2 players, and the new solo mode in the 2nd edition does a great job of simulating that player count. You're moving your cowboy along this expanding path of action locations, trying to create a valuable hand of cattle by the time you reach the end of the path. This game has so many different paths to victory, and that is one of my absolute favorite things. Viticulture is a medium-weight worker placement game with an easy-to-run solo mode all about making wine. You get to plant grapes, harvest them, age your wine in cellars, and then sell it for money and victory points. My absolute favorite way to play is with the Tuscany expansion board, where the actions are stretched out over 4 seasons, which just adds this delicious timing element to the worker placement. In underwater cities, the Earth is overpopulated, so it is up to you to establish cities under the ocean. You accomplish this engineering feat through worker placement and card play, where you're trying to play the same color action and card so you can activate both. Much of the game involves drawing cards from the top of a massive deck and tactically playing them to get massive amounts of resources that you're going to need to complete tunnels and farms and domes for your aquatic civilization. Cartographer's Heroes is a flip and write game, and it's one I can get behind despite not being a fan of the genre, because the theme of being a map maker, charting out a fantasy land is just so damn cool. And then you actually get to physically make the map. And best of all, there's also a compelling tile laying game here, making this more than just a fun art project. Anachrony is a heavy worker placement game with an intriguing sci-fi setting where everyone is preparing for the end of the world. You have 4 different types of workers, each that are better or worse at different types of actions and incapable of doing others. Some actions even require your workers to enter mechs, and if you have the minis, the workers slip right in. It's so satisfying. Weather Machine is another heavy, brain-destroying Eurogame from one of my favorite designers. You'll be moving your one worker around to 4 different locations, trying to fix a mad scientist's rogue weather machine before it destroys the world. This game requires a lot of long-term planning, and the path to success is never obvious. But the payoff is so worth it when you finally have that plan come together. The abstract look of Ginkopolis belies just how colorful and unique it really is. In this tile-laying city-building game, you'll be using cards and tiles to expand the city outwardly, as well as building up, creating stacks of tiles. Things can get real swingy and super mean, but remarkably, the very simple solo mode manages to capture the confrontational spirit of this game. Not many pure racing games are playable solo. Heat Pedal to the Metal is, and its streamlined AI system elevates this game from merely good to best of the genre. The AI is controlled by a simple flip of a card, and their movement is based on their proximity to a corner, so it isn't just completely random. Your own driving uses a clever card cycling mechanism where you add and remove heat cards at just the right time in order to cut that corner or sneak into a slipstream, gaining these little tiny advantages which are crucial to pulling off that photo finish. You don't need to be a Star Wars fan or a pickup and delivery fan to enjoy Star Wars Outer Rim. I'm so-so with both, but I have so much fun flying around in this game, traveling from planet to planet, picking up jobs and crew, earning money, upgrading my ship, managing my reputation with different factions, and maybe even engaging in a little ship combat. It's a glorious adventure, and I highly recommend adding the Unfinished Business expansion. That really elevates the game by injecting it with extra theme and story, by giving you an epic life mission to accomplish. Maquis is a small box solo-only game where you place your worker meeples in locations throughout the city that provide different resources or actions. The twist here is that police meeples are being randomly placed in locations as well, and at the end of the round, your workers need to be able to trace a clear path back to your hideout. This clever system adds stressful moments of push your luck to the typical worker placement formula. Marvel United X-Men is a simple and quick family-friendly cooperative game. You choose 3 heroes and a villain from a pile of options, especially if you have some of the numerous expansions. You're simply playing a card on your turn from the character's unique small deck and taking the action on that card as well as the previously played card. This means characters can set each other up with the actions they need, which creates this thematic sense of the heroes working as a team. The Lost Expedition is a great example of a game that has simple rules but manages to be consistently exciting to play. This one stands out due to its evocative artwork on these really awesome tarot-sized cards, so you really get to enjoy it. The theme of exploration and survival really appeals to me in games, and the gameplay works so well as you try to order the cards just right to avoid the really nasty events and capitalize on the beneficial ones. I always find myself grinding over the decisions in this game. Sprawlopolis was one of the first solo microgames I ever played, and it remains one of the best. I'm particularly a fan of the new standalone sequel, Naturopolis. They both feature relatively simple tile-laying mechanisms, and the fact that you flip over 3 random cards to get 3 random scoring conditions, that twist gives this game so much replayability and strategic depth, despite only consisting of 18 cards. Warp's Edge is a solo-only bag builder. You'll go up against a fleet of minion ships, and one of several different motherships with unique properties. When you either defeat or evade an enemy ship, you get to place a new token into your bag, slowly building up an arsenal of firepower and special actions. It's such a satisfying and even addictive gaming loop, and really captures the spirit of an epic space battle. If you like spatial puzzles, then Rove is the perfect pocket game. You play as a super cute robot, so that's a good start. But there are these 6 modules on the board, and you must move them around to form specific configurations. But each module moves in a different way. Accomplishing the task might be easy in, say, 5 moves, but can you figure out how to do it in 4 or even 3 moves? Often there's a more efficient way, and when you discover the solution, it feels so satisfying. The Bloody Inn does dark humor better than any other board game I've ever played. The gorgeous and unsettling artwork transports you to this macabre hotel where you murder your guests to steal their money. The card play here is so clever. You must spin cards from your hand to take actions unless the character on that card is proficient in that action. In that case, you get to keep the card. So you must bribe the right characters at the right time to help you with your dark pursuits, and also watch out for the police because you'll instantly lose if they ever catch you with unburied bodies lying around. After all these years, Friday remains one of the most innovative deck building games of all time. You're faced with a challenge, and if you succeed, you get to flip the card over and add it to your deck. But you must also manage your health, purposefully injuring yourself at times in order to trash bad cards and thin your deck. Deciding when to push for success and when to admit failure is tricky, and after all of this time, I have yet to master it. In the solo-only Halls of Hegra, you play as the commander of a group of Norwegian volunteers fighting an overwhelming German force from an abandoned mountain fortress in the early days of World War II. This isn't really a war game, though. It's more of a war-themed game and takes its inspiration from other worker placement survival games. Really, at its heart, it's a tower defense game that continues to change and intensify as the turns go along, climaxing in an all-out German assault that is harrowing and memorable. The new Ultimate Edition of 51st State comes with a fantastic new solo mode that finally makes this great game worth playing solitaire. Turns are super quick in this game. You are just taking these simple little actions over and over, maybe playing a card, gaining some resources, converting resources into points, etc. And the new Borgo Automa manages to preserve this flow by having turns that are equally as simple and quick to run. Coffee Roaster is a solo-only bag builder about making the perfect cup of coffee. Everything about this game is quirky, from that theme to the artwork to the gameplay, which involves pulling tokens out of a bag, manipulating them using abilities, discarding the bad stuff, and roasting the beans to higher numbers. I find this game to be so relaxing and even meditative, making it, ironically, a great quick game to pull out late at night. The Solitaire expansion transforms Concordia into a fantastic solo experience by replacing the main deck of action cards with matching cards that also have AI actions on them. So you're still playing the same game, using cards from your hand to move people and ships, spread out, build buildings, trade resources, acquire new cards. But now the AI opponent will also take an action, which is just written on the card you just played. It's super elegant, simple to run, and works on all the different maps, making this an essential expansion. Multi-use cards are one of my favorite mechanisms, and La Granja has some of the most multi-use of multi-use cards. Each card can be used in 4 different ways by physically tucking it under one of the 4 sides of your player board. You might decide to improve your farm or create a new field of wheat, olives, or grapes. Maybe you'll use the card for its delivery contract on top or just for the special ability at the bottom. This game also has a great dice drafting phase, as well as area majority, contract fulfillment, and a simple solo AI. Spirit Island is a popular, heavy cooperative game where you play as a spirit defending an island's inhabitants from colonizers, which is a refreshing twist on troubling board game norms. You must either wipe the colonizers out or instill enough fear in them to make them leave, and you do so by using really deep strategic card play. This game has so many different ways to increase the challenge, meaning it's a title that can continue to hit the table forever, no matter how good you get at it. Of all the many iterations on the Pandemic system, Pandemic Iberia is my favorite. I prefer the historical setting, and I like that this plays similarly to the original Pandemic, with the same mechanisms for infections, outbreaks, and epidemics, just with a few simple twists, which I think adds a lot to the strategic depth. If I can only own one Pandemic game, this would be it. Rare is a board game that is both wacky and smart, but the loop manages to nail both. Underneath its colorful illustrations and delightfully irreverent time travel theme is a cooperative deck building game with combo-rific card play. If you're clever, you can loop your cards, reactivating them, which can lead to my favorite thing in all of board gaming, the coveted Mega Turn, where you use abilities on top of abilities to pull off insane actions. Nemesis is unofficially Aliens the board game, and it absolutely nails that cinematic sci-fi survival horror atmosphere. You explore a derelict spaceship infested with hostile aliens, using card actions to complete specific goals. And as you sneak around and make noise, the terror builds because you know any alien encounter could result in infection or instant death. If a board game could have jump scares, Nemesis is the one. Arkham Horror the card game is a cooperative adventure campaign game set in a Lovecraftian world of monsters, cultists, and madness. This game utilizes cards so creatively. One scenario, you're exploring a house, flipping over cards for each room, and then before you know it, you're running down the cars of a moving train. You just never know what's going to happen next because literally anything could happen, and that makes for an exciting adventure. When I think of adventure, I actually think about Sleeping Gods. It has everything I want in an adventure game. An unfamiliar world to explore, entertaining stories that let me make decisions that have consequences, colorful characters who change and grow, and a fun combat system. I can set sail in any direction in this vast sandbox. Capturing that feeling of freedom in a board game is truly special. In Ark Nova, you get to create your own zoo by building enclosures and filling them with cute animals from a giant deck of cards. It borrows mechanisms from other games, including the terrific action river system from Civilization: A New Dawn. There's also familiar tableau and engine building ideas, similar to games like Terraforming Mars, but for me, Ark Nova surpasses those influences. In Obsession, you're trying to rehab your troubled family's reputation in mid-19th century Victorian England by hosting social activities on your estate. Each activity requires you to manage your workforce as well as have the right guests available, which are just cards in your hand. Getting everything to line up takes careful planning. Best of all, the solo opponent gets out of the way, letting you focus entirely on the puzzly decisions. Every horror movie fan needs to play Final Girl, a solo-only dice-driven survival game that lets you experience whatever horror trope you desire, from classic slasher films to strange sci-fi and fantasy stuff. Every scenario in the box has a different location and villain with unique rules and special abilities that nail the atmosphere. There's plenty of luck in rolling the dice to activate your action cards, but the cinematic story the game tells makes every bad roll as satisfying as the good ones. Lost Ruins of Arnak really appeals to my love of exploration in games. You'll be sending out your small number of workers to discover new locations, defeat fantastical guardians, and collect resources and relics. You'll also be doing some light deck building with multi-use cards. The solo opponent is super quick and easy to manage, just flip over a tile and take a simple action. And the Leaders expansion so elevates the base game that I consider it essential. The Castles of Burgundy is one of my favorite two-player games, and now, thanks to the new Special Edition Deluxe reprint, there's a new solo mode with a solo opponent run by a small deck of cards, and it just works fantastic. This is a classic tile-laying game where you use dice to take actions. I love puzzling out how to use my 2 dice most effectively each turn, and filling up large regions and scoring big is so satisfying. At the Gates of Loyang might look like any other farming, trading strategy game, but it doesn't feel like any other game, because your turns are so free-flowing. You have a long list of actions, and apart from one of them, you can do them as many times as you want and in any order that you want. It's like jazz. You buy and sell vegetables, trade with market stalls, use helper special abilities, plant and harvest fields, and I really wish more games had the same feeling as this one. Frostpunk is the perfect video game adaptation because it takes the bleak setting and stories and the fascinating survival city building from the video game and concentrates it into a handful of critical, meaningful decisions each round. Can you juggle keeping the giant central furnace lit so your population can work without getting sick, while also growing the city, creating shelters and producing food, and managing the morale of your citizens? You feel the chill in your spine, knowing you're always one wrong move away from an icy death. There's not much I can say about Gloomhaven that hasn't already been said. It's one of the most beloved cooperative board games of all time. It combines traditional campaign-based dungeon crawl mechanisms where your heroes level up and get better special abilities and weapons, but it does away with dice combat and replaces it with a brilliant card system, which requires careful tactical planning each turn. Every new scenario in the campaign feels like a new puzzle to solve, rather than just a dice-rolling luck fest, and for me, that's an ideal combo. This War of Mine is the most profound board game I've ever played. The side of the box says, "In war, not everyone is a soldier," and that perfectly sums up what this game is about. You play as regular citizens caught in the middle of a war trying to survive the physical and mental toll. The survival gameplay here is solid, but that's all overshadowed by the harrowing stories you encounter as you play, often forcing you to make gut-wrenching decisions and live with the consequences. Mage Knight is an unforgiving, demanding efficiency puzzle masquerading as a fantasy adventure. The possibilities seem endless for how you can play out each hand, and when you unlock the perfect turn, squeezing out every last drop of potential from your cards, the feeling is euphoric. This game is just the ultimate puzzle, and I consider that the highest praise. One of the most satisfying actions in all of board gaming is placing down polyomino tiles in a Feast for Odin. I absolutely love Tetrising these weird shapes together, trying to surround bonus boxes and earn extra income. You're using worker placement to acquire these shapes, but when playing solo, you use 2 different colors of workers and simply leave the previous workers on their spots, effectively blocking yourself from round to round, which is so genius, it actually makes solo my preferred way to play. And number 1, as it has been for years, is Robinson Crusoe: Adventures on the Cursed Island. This cooperative adventure survival game manages to do something almost no other game can. It creates memorable and evocative stories out of strategic gameplay rather than having to read a bunch of text. Each scenario feels so different and distinct, it is like having multiple games in one box. And yet every scenario features the same brilliant push your luck worker placement mechanism where you decide whether to take one safe action or two risky actions each round. This often results in events and encounters which require choices with actual consequences that trigger later in the game, giving the story a consistency rarely felt in board games. Robinson Crusoe is a masterpiece and easily my #1 solo game of all time. And there you go, my top 50 solo games of all time. Which ones did I miss from your list? Please write those down in the comments, and while you're at it, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.